Is Airbnb getting into rental arbitrage themselves? Does this mean that you could go out of business? Are they competing with you directly as a host? Let's talk about it. Welcome back, Airbnb family. So Airbnb is investing into your competition. I'm going to tell you why they are, or why I think that they are, what this could mean for you in the future, and how you can directly combat this, because you need to know the facts and you need to know where your advantages are against even the king of home share, which is Airbnb. It's possible. So this actually comes from a group, the Hosts of Airbnb Automated Facebook page that we created for this YouTube channel. There's a couple of longtime hosts in the group that are talking about this, and this comes off of some recent news. We've talked about previously that Airbnb invested $160 million into Lyric, which is an arbitrage company that does like multi-unit apartments. They're actually in some buildings that I've done work with. And so they invested $160 million into that business. That business is worth $240 million is what that one is stated to be worth. But they just invested $55 million into another business called Zeus, which does arbitrage also, but specializes in single family homes, corporate housing, more specifically monthly stays or longer. That's their play. And they've got a really interesting relationship with their single family homeowners and how they negotiate this. And that company actually has like 2,000 plus doors already. So Zeus is pretty big. That $55 million invested at, I think, a $205 million valuation for all of you venture capitalist kind of guys out there. So what does this mean? Well, Airbnb is investing into multiple businesses that are on their own platform. One thing that's fun that you guys may not know is that Lyric was started by the same people who started the business Wheelhouse. And Wheelhouse is a pricing strategy software. What happened with Wheelhouse is they saw that it was so profitable that they could get into the business, and they started pushing in and doing their own rental arbitrage because they had good tech, right? They're tech enabled, and they knew where all the money was and they wanted to get in. So they were kind of drawn in. So now Airbnb is invested in a company that also shares an office with Wheelhouse. So Airbnb has access to all this stuff. So why is Airbnb doing this? And the scare here is that Airbnb is investing into all these big companies that will eventually allow them to scale and seize all of this market share and have all this, huge amount of operations, and then push everybody else out of business, right? So there'll only be big conglomerates, basically. It's like Airbnb has put money into the Hilton and IGF Group and only big hoteliers, and 3 will remain and everybody else will die. That's the fear. And honestly, that could happen, right? We can't actually take that off the table. It's very possible that Airbnb, by investing hundreds of millions of dollars into the front of their business model, they could choose some winners and everybody else loses if it all goes that way. It's very much possible. So let's talk about some just generic business stuff, but I also want to start with a theory. For those of you out there who could answer this or speculate on this theory, I want to know your opinion. If we haven't gotten to it yet, I'm going to tell you how to fight back and how to stay in business. Okay, this is going to be a slightly longer video. You need to know that there is a way to succeed here. Okay, so forward note, we're about to talk about this in the second half of the video. I think that Airbnb's investing into these different businesses is a synergy play. And the synergy at play here is that by investing into people who utilize their platform, they can get data back from large-scale operators, and they can continue to innovate their software based on the needs of large-scale operators, because most of the money to be made in the transaction fee side, which is how Airbnb, Booking.com, Expedia, they all get paid, is like a transaction fee or commission. All that money, the majority of it, comes from bigger people. Like I have over 100 properties on Airbnb, and I have a business rep at Airbnb. So I think that by investing in these larger companies, they're getting under the hood of these big businesses, and they're getting data back on what they can do to stay innovative. And they're really trying to compete with Booking.com and Expedia. They're actually trying to push them out. It's not that they're trying to push their hosts out. They're trying to push other platforms out, and they want to win all the market share of the booking volume. It's not like that they want to destroy their own hosts. It's that they want to destroy Booking.com and Expedia and become the big player in the game. Expedia and HomeAway are the same, by the way, just so you guys know. If you have 1 home or 2 homes, HomeAway. If you have more than 20 properties, you could be on Expedia. It's catching you up. So that's my thoughts. It's my core theory here. So those of you who are business tenured people who are like mega super smart, in the comments, I'd like to hear what you think, because I obviously didn't go to school to get an MBA, right? I didn't graduate from like Princeton. So help me out, guys. Help the audience to understand what else is at play. If there's other market forces at play that you think people are missing, put it. So let me continue. So synergy is a big part of this. Whether or not my theory is correct, synergy is there. So the Airbnb essentially is investing money forward towards the customer. This is like forward integration. It's like a type of monopolization, right? So they basically, every point of the value delivery chain, they're trying to own a part of. So from the customer going online to booking accommodation to showing up at the accommodation, having their experience. The only other thing that Airbnb could do now is to start a manufacturing business that makes sheets and towels and welcome cards for on top of your table or furniture. I mean, they could get into that too and supply furniture into the homes that Lyric and Zeus are actually picking up. Like they could get into that game, right? So that's another form of forward integration. So they have the technology, they have the real estate, they have the operations know-how now, and they could supply the hard goods eventually. And that's how they can like basically integrate closer and closer to the customer and control more of that process. Now, you know, Airbnb's always loved control. See, Airbnb is different than Booking.com and Expedia and HomeAway and VRBO and stuff, which is that all those other ones, once the guest books, that information, that reservation is your property, including the credit card, like especially Booking.com. Now, Airbnb is different because they own that customer, they own the reservation, they own the guest experience all the way through, and they're much more demanding of their hosts. See, you don't get the credit card from a guest on Airbnb. So if a guest destroys your property, you can't just try to charge the card for the security deposit or the hold or whatever, because you didn't actually get to do that. Airbnb goes and tries to collect from the guest and has a host guarantee for you, right? So that's one of the big differences. So Airbnb has always been about control. And through that control, they're hoping to really kind of like win the space by making sure that the guest experience is good and making sure that Airbnb is what's called sticky. Sticky is where a non-brand loyal person starts to become brand loyal because it's hard not to use the product. See, iPhones are really good at being sticky. With like the blue messages, that's like a thing to make you sticky. Everybody else's text messages are green, but if you're iPhone to iPhone, you get blue messages. And before Android really started like investing in like these little like apps and widgets, iPhones also had emojis. Remember, iPhones were like the emoji phone for a while, and that was one thing that made them sticky as well. And iCloud is another way to be sticky. See, Airbnb wants to be sticky because the truth is your travelers are not brand loyal. They're not loyal to you. They're not loyal to me. They're not loyal to Airbnb. A lot of people booking on Airbnb are trying something new. There's still a lot of new users in the space. This is also a sign, right? Airbnb investing into multiple businesses like ours, Host and I. By the way, I'm about to tell you what to do. Okay, Airbnb is investing a lot of money into multiple players, and this is a good sign for us. This means that Airbnb actually is doubling down on the space. See, Airbnb just created its technology 10, 12 years ago, and that technology was to facilitate this type of transaction. They were very much third party to the whole thing, if you think about it, right? They didn't have any skin in the game on the real estate. They didn't have any liabilities. They don't have leases. Airbnb is putting money in where they could very realistically lose all that money on lease liabilities. See, I have year-long, 3-year-long leases. See, if I went completely out of business, hypothetically, I have, $1,500 a month for 3 years times like 100, right? So ballpark, my rents are more like 130,000 a year, I think right now, or 130,000 a month right now. I have some 3-bedroom properties that are like 2,100. Actually, my most expensive rent is a 3-bedroom, 3-bath that's like 2,400 a month and change. But I also have properties that are like 900 and change. Right? So my spread here, my total rent roll for my 100 or so properties is like 132,000 a month. Okay. But take that for 3 years, right? I owe millions of dollars over the next 3 years, right? If I stop generating revenue, I would have like a ton of debt, right? I'd have like roughly $4 million of debt in 30 months, right? So at 36 months, it's a lot. So Airbnb is risking this loss, right? They're putting money into racehorses, which some will lose. The way venture capital works is you put your money on a roulette table and you whip that ball around and it's going to land on a number. And that number is going to win a lot of money and everybody else loses. Okay, so Airbnb thinks that they understand the game enough that they can pick the winners. They think Lyric's going to win. They think Zeus is going to win. They might invest into more players, but they think people are going to win. They think that rental arbitrage is going to win. How cool is that? So this is a good sign for our industry as a whole. If you're, Airbnb, if you owned an Airbnb, there's arguably more like entrenchment, right? Where you could possibly like survive and make more money than somebody in a recession. But there's also data that shows that the only people who really lose money are people who own homes. Like rental arbitrageurs are not losing money in the space. And we're going to do that in a different video too. Okay. So how do you fight back is now the question, right? So I think that it's not a scary thing that Airbnb is investing into different businesses. I think it makes academic sense for the sake of synergy, controlling more of the value delivery chain, being able to be more responsive to the build out, all that good stuff. But how do you survive just in case? Let's say Airbnb is putting money into players who are going to eat your lunch, right? The market share is going to hit a critical mass, and the more they grow, the more you shrink. Like, how can you fight back? Well, there's something built into Airbnb that is unachievable at their scale. It's just not possible. And I can tell you that I lost superhost status at like 30 reservations. And all the other guys like who are pitching you, except for Richard Fertig, I don't know, he doesn't have more than 10 properties yet. So I really can't like say he's a big player in the game. But out of all the people who are like trying to give you information, Richard Fertig probably is the only person with superhost status on his account. Everybody else has got trash, right? We're like 4.5. Right? We have 4.5 star reservation average, which sucks because 4.8 is superhost. And one of our commenters said this slumlord status, but at 100 properties, maybe we're playing a different game. Well, that Chai or whatever latte dude, he's like at like 4.1 or something. His reservations are absolutely trash. When he first started talking crap about us to try to like get people to come from this channel to him, one of our subscribers went and found his like listings and they're just junk. Sonder's even worse. Like Sonder at some of the buildings that I have, their stars are like 3.5 star, right? So the bigger you get, the harder it is to maintain superhost. It's just the way that it is. So with that said, if you want to compete on Airbnb for their own game, Airbnb, like we said in a previous video, is an interest algorithm. They are not going to jack that algorithm and completely change it and flip it upside down to try to push all the traffic to the portfolio of properties that they have invested in. Because if you think about it, let's look at it like this way. Let's say Airbnb doubles their current investment into properties, right? Zeus has like 2,000. Lyric has like 500 and change. That's 2,500 doors. Let's say they double their investment or they double their position and have 5,000 doors. And let's say both of those businesses double, right? So now they have 10,000 total doors. How many total doors are on Airbnb right now? Millions of properties are on Airbnb. And if they try to jack their whole algorithm to drive traffic towards 10,000 specific locations out of the millions, they'd skew their whole business model, right? Their whole algorithm would change and everything would shift. And they would lose their best hosts because they would accidentally betray all of their super hosts, their Airbnb Plus hosts. Everything would get jacked up and people would stop making making good enough money to stick around. And see, Airbnb, in order to stay the king in market share, in order to be the winner in this space, they have to provide excellent service to millions of guests a day. And they can't do that with 10,000 properties. You cannot put millions of guests in 10,000 properties, right? So they will always largely rely on us. And so they're going to be exceptionally loyal to the top bracket of their review base, right? So if you are Superhost, if you have tons and tons of reviews and you have a deep tome of data because you have seniority on Airbnb and you've got just lots of activity, they do not want to buck you. Right? If they lose the winning class of Airbnb to, let's say, a competitor because they try to double deal and like get more money because they own some positions, they will lose the majority of their business and they'll be stuck with just a couple of their main rental arbitrageurs and they'll be trying to build it all from scratch. They scaled this big off of you and I. They didn't scale this big off of Lyric and Zeus. So even though your concerns, if you have them, are warranted, that they're investing into businesses and those businesses will get an unfair advantage, well, money in itself is an unfair advantage, but money itself also can be dangerous, right? You can overwater the plant. The small businesses, they get too much money too soon, don't know how to behave appropriately, and they can't ever run lean when the time comes. So surviving a recession, maybe buy your property cool, but understand that in order to make this business model work, you need to learn to run lean. Have your own housekeepers, try to get your properties under market, under rent rate. So my market rents, I try to get in under market for all my rent. That gives me a little bit more fortitude. And think about your business as like a non-sexy business. Think of it as just like this is a hotel business, and maintain good reviews and a lean operational structure. And by being Superhost, you are much more likely to survive any sort of fallout that Airbnb would ever create by shifting anything, if they ever did, which, like I just said, it's completely nonsense. And get your own direct bookings, right? So build your own web presence, build your own brand. So you need a travel brand. You also need an employer brand so you can hire housekeepers. And you should work on your branding and work on your own customer retention. Because right now, a lot of Airbnb guests are not brand loyal. They will go on Airbnb and they'll try this and try that. Once they stay at your home, it's your opportunity to capture them. So we're going to talk about how to make you as an Airbnb host sticky as well. And that'll come in the future. So I hope this really helps you understand the landscape that we're fighting in. It's not going to be doom and gloom. I personally think. I'm optimistic. I tend to be that way though. So in the comments, what do you think? Do you think that this play could really crush a lot of Airbnb hosts? Do you think that your business is on the chopping block here because Airbnb is putting millions, hundreds of millions into other people? Do you think you're at stake? Would love to know your thoughts. Contribute in the comments and you might just hear from me as well. Thank you for watching Airbnb Automated, and I'll see you on the other side.
Hi.